Pressured by President Trump to reopen the economy amid the coronavirus outbreak, governors across the nation on Friday laid out varying paths as they tried to balance public health with the crushing financial pressures facing the nation's workers. Texas is opening its parks and Florida's governor told local officials they could let beachgoers return.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced that his state would reopen state parks, allow retailers to offer to-go sales and let physicians and nurses perform diagnostic tests and surgeries that had been put on hold to ensure hospital capacity for COVID-19 patients.
Additional openings, possibly including restaurants and movie theaters and an easing of the state's stay-at-home order, will be announced April 27, he said.
We have demonstrated that we can corral the coronavirus, Abbott said as he announced the creation of a strike force, including medical experts, elected officials and business leaders, to guide the effort to reopen his state's economy.
The restriction changes, which start next week, include safeguards such as social distancing requirements to minimize the risk of transmission. Abbott also announced that K-12 schools and colleges would be closed for the remainder of the academic year and set new measures to protect residents of nursing homes and assisted living facilities.
More than 32,000 people in the U.S. have died from COVID-19, the disease caused by the novel coronavirus, according to Johns Hopkins University. Public health officials have repeatedly emphasized that effective testing is needed before state and local restrictions can be safely lifted. But problems continue to limit the number of tests that can be done.
Abbott, when asked for specifics on what he said would be an increase in testing, said that in late April and early May, it'll be going up quite a bit.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who was harshly criticized for allowing spring breakers to crowd his state's shores as the coronavirus spread across the nation, said Friday that local officials could reopen beaches if they could do so safely.
Do it in a good way. Do it in a safe way, DeSantis said at a news conference in Fort Lauderdale.
Beaches in Jacksonville would open for limited hours and with social distancing requirements at 5 p.m. Friday, the city's mayor announced. Activities such as swimming, fishing and surfing are allowed, but beachgoers are not permitted to sunbathe or barbecue.
Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds on Friday also committed to a phased reopening of businesses while simultaneously announcing that schools would not reopen for the remainder of the academic year.
I know that the possibility of getting life back to normal sooner rather than later is what hardworking Iowans want, and it's absolutely what I want too, she said.
Abbott, DeSantis and Reynolds made the remarks a day after the president laid out a three-phase plan for the nation to get back to work. Although the president on Thursday emphasized that the decision to reopen state economies was ultimately up to the governors, on Friday he took to Twitter to urge them to act.
Liberate Minnesota, the president tweeted, making similar comments about Michigan and Virginia. Trump tweeted the messages shortly before a group called Liberate Minnesota protested outside Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's house over his decision to extend his state's stay-at-home order into May. Similar protests took place this week in Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, North Carolina and Utah.
I, along with my staff, are fighting a biological war, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam said, when asked to respond to Trump's tweet. I do not have time to involve myself in Twitter wars.
Other governors, particularly those in the hardest-hit states, warned that reopening their economies too quickly could result in a spike in new infections and deaths.
The situation we're in now is unsustainable. People can't stay in their homes for this length of time. You can't keep the economy closed forever, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said during his daily briefing. But he warned that their margin of error was very narrow. Operate too fast, in 3 days and we'll be right back where we started.
All parades, rallies and other large non-essential public events scheduled to take place in New York City in May are canceled, Mayor Bill de Blasio announced Friday.
New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said residents of his state should expect restrictions to remain in place until the crisis eases. He acknowledged bubbling frustration in the state, which has seen an increase in deaths but a decrease in the number of new infections.
I know social distancing is hard, Murphy said. I know it's not fun. I know it's going to be a few more weeks, at least. If you want to be mad at me, go ahead. But my number one goal, my entire focus, is on defeating this virus and getting our state back to where we can reopen.
Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who has sparred with the president and is on Democrat Joe Biden's short list for a running mate, pushed back at the protesters who chanted, "Lock her up," outside the state capitol in Lansing this week. She said she hoped to ease some restrictions in her state on May 1, but it would depend on the science.
It's better to be 6 feet apart right now than 6 feet under, she said on ABC's Good Morning America.
In California, which has avoided the death rates seen elsewhere because of early shutdowns, Governor Gavin Newsom announced the creation of a task force of business and elected leaders to guide the state's economic recovery as unemployment climbs and the state endures a pandemic-induced recession.
Washington Governor Jay Inslee went after Trump over his liberation tweets, calling them unhinged rantings that are putting people at danger of contracting the coronavirus and potentially inciting violence. Trump, Inslee said, is undermining his own public health advisors and his own administration's sensible plan to gradually restart the economy.
There was wide agreement among governors about the need for greater testing capacity, saying it's the only way to safely reopen the economy broadly.
We need to ramp up this capacity as quickly as possible, more testing, so we can find out sooner when someone has COVID-19, then do contact tracing next to isolate individuals they've come into contact with, said Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards on Thursday. That's really how you can reopen the economy.
A major obstacle is a lack of testing kits, including the reagents necessary to do the tests. Once again, states and the federal government are competing to purchase the supplies, often from China.
More than one-third of the deaths in the U.S. have occurred in New York State. The daily count of deaths and new infections remained roughly stable in the state, but Cuomo noted that the number of hospitalizations and intubations had declined.
New York's governor has often avoided fighting with Trump as he sought federal aid from the president. But the pair repeatedly clashed on Friday, with the president tweeting during Cuomo's press briefing that the governor ought to spend more time doing and less time complaining. Get out there and get the job done. Stop talking.
Cuomo responded by saying that the president should stop watching television and do his job, and sarcastically responded to the president's listing of all that the federal government had done for the state, including helping turn the Javits Convention Center into a field hospital.
"I don't know what I'm supposed to do, send a bouquet of flowers," he said. "Thank you again, Mr. President, for the Javits. Thank you for the U.S. Navy ship Comfort, which is just doing your job as president. It's not really thank you like you wrote a check yourself, but thank you." The Associated Press contributed to this report.